The auction room was loud and full of light. Creatures from every corner of the galaxy had come to watch. They were not here for fun or kindness. They were here to buy lives, to own someone. And today, the center of attention was a young alien girl. Her skin was pale and bruised. Her dress was torn, barely covering her thin body. Chains hung from her wrists, and her feet dragged as guards pulled her in. She looked around, terrified, her big eyes full of pain and fear. No one cared. They only laughed louder. "She's a weak one," someone shouted from the crowd. "Probably won't survive a week," another jeered. But the girl didn't speak. She just lowered her head and whispered softly, "Please, not again." It was a whisper meant for the stars, not for the crowd. They laughed, enjoying her fear. The announcer stepped forward, his voice booming through the speakers. "Up next, a rare creature from the outer colonies, young, fertile, and mostly unharmed." The crowd cheered like it was a game show. The girl flinched, her hands shaking. That's when a man stepped into the edge of the crowd. He was human, plain-looking, in dusty clothes. No one noticed him at first. He didn't shout or cheer. He just stood there, still, watching her. The girl felt his eyes on her. They were different, quiet, calm, and not cruel. She looked up slowly, her lips trembling, and for a second, the world around her disappeared. Only his eyes remained, holding her there. Then, a small voice came into her ear, so soft, so gentle. She almost thought she imagined it. "Don't be afraid, you're safe." Now, her eyes widened. She looked around, but no one else had moved. She didn't understand who said that. Was it him? The bidding started. Voices shouted numbers, hands raised high. The price went up quickly. Everyone wanted a piece of her. Not because she was special, but because they thought she was cheap and helpless. Suddenly, the human raised his hand. Everyone turned to look at him, surprised. A few laughed again, mocking him. "You? What would a human do with her?" One alien scoffed. "Go home, little man," another growled. But he didn't lower his hand. He didn't look angry or afraid. He just kept his eyes on the girl and said, "I bid 500 credits. A silence followed. Then the crowd erupted again. "Make him pay more," someone shouted. "Let's see how far he'll go." The girl's heart raced. Was this real? Was he trying to help her? More bids flew, numbers growing higher and higher. The human didn't stop. He raised again and again, until the others grew tired of the game. Finally, the announcer slammed his hammer down. "Sold to the human," he said, almost in disbelief. The girl stood frozen. She expected the man to drag her like the others, to hit her, maybe worse. But he walked forward slowly and took off his coat. He gently placed it over her shoulders. His voice came again, this time out loud. "Let's go home." Home, she didn't even remember what that word meant. She didn't move at first, unsure if it was a trick. But he reached out his hand, open and patient. She stared at it, then at him. No chains, no threats, just silence and waiting. Finally, her trembling hand touched his. It felt warm, real, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of something, hope, maybe. He led her through the crowd. People whispered, stared, some even laughed again, but the human ignored them. He held her hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. They walked out of the auction room together. The door closed behind them with a loud hiss, but in her heart, it felt like the sound of a cage opening. She didn't know what was coming next, but she had heard his voice. And it whispered again in her mind, "You're safe now." The metal doors hissed shut behind them, but the silence outside the auction hall felt heavier than the noise inside. The girl walked slowly, her legs weak, her body wrapped in the oversized coat. She expected the man to speak, maybe order her to do something. Maybe worse, but he said nothing. They moved through dark alleys and empty streets. No one followed, not yet. The girl kept stealing glances at him. Why had he bought her? What did he want from her? No one helped someone like her without a price. Finally, they reached an old cargo hauler parked beside a loading dock. The human opened the ramp with a simple code and motioned for her to enter. Inside, it was clean. Warm and dimly lit, nothing like what she imagined. She hesitated at the threshold. He noticed, turned, and said softly, "You can rest in there. You're safe." That word again, safe. She stepped in, expecting hidden chains, cuffs, or cameras. Instead, she saw blankets, food packets, and a water flask placed neatly on a side shelf. The human handed her the water, then took a step back. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "Eat, drink, then sleep if you can." She watched him closely as she sipped the water. It was fresh, real, no drugs, no tricks. He sat down near the controls and started typing. Silently, as if she wasn't some prize or burden, but just someone. Her voice came out dry, unsure. Why did you buy me?" He didn't turn around, just answered calmly. "Because no one else was going to help you." She frowned, confused. "You paid too much, it was dangerous." He gave a small smile. "You're worth more than they think, those." Words hit her harder than any chain ever had. No one had ever said that to her. Not once. She sat down slowly, too stunned to speak. The warmth of the coat wrapped around her like a shield, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an object. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. The cargo bay hummed quietly, and the stars blinked through a tiny window. She crept closer to where the man sat, his eyes half closed. "Who are you?" she asked in a whisper. He opened one eye and looked at her. "Just a traveler." "Travelers don't risk their lives for strangers," she said, her voice sharp. He paused for a long moment, then replied, "I've seen what this galaxy does to people who can't fight back, and I promised myself, if I ever could, I'd change that, even a little." The girl didn't know what to say. Was he serious? Was he insane? Either way, he hadn't touched her, hadn't yelled. That alone made him different from everyone else she'd ever met. Suddenly, a red light blinked on the console. The man's expression turned cold and focused. "They're coming," he muttered. "Someone didn't like that I won the bid." He stood and grabbed a duffel bag, pulling out a small blaster and a map tablet. Panic rose in her chest. "They'll take me back," she whispered, shaking. "No," he said firmly. "I didn't buy you to lose you." He handed her a spare cum device and clipped a small tag to her wrist. "If we get separated, follow the signal." She nodded, though fear still sat heavy in her chest. Within minutes, the ship took off, engines rumbling low. He piloted fast, weaving through the lower atmosphere. Chatter came through the radio. Bounty ships were already tracking them. She watched him work, calm and skilled. Not a random traveler, he had done this before. She clutched the coat tighter as the ship made a sharp turn. Alarms beeped, lights flashed, and her heart pounded. Still, he didn't yell at her, didn't blame her. He simply said, "Hold on, I'll get us out." And somehow she believed him. An explosion shook the back of the hauler. "We've been hit," he muttered, teeth clenched. "Landing in 10 seconds, brace yourself." They crashed through a forest canopy, branches snapping against the hull. The ship groaned but didn't break. Smoke filled the air. She coughed, trying to stand, but her legs gave way. The man lifted her gently and helped her out of the ship. Through the haze, she saw trees, old ruins and glowing plants, and kind of forgotten jungle world. "Temporary hideout," he said, scanning the trees. "We'll be safe here for now." She looked at him, dirty, bruised, and yet still calm. He noticed her gaze and gave a quiet nod. "I didn't just buy your freedom," he said. "I'm going to protect it too." And with those words, he turned to face the jungle, ready for whatever came next. The forest was quiet, but not peaceful. Strange sounds echoed from deep within the trees. Rustling leaves, distant howls, the clicking of unseen creatures. The human held a scanner in one hand and kept his other hand near his blaster. The alien girl stayed close behind him, her bare feet silent on the mossy ground. Smoke still rose behind them from the crash site. They had no time to rest. Bounty hunters were already scanning the sky. The girl heard the faint hum of tracking drones circling above the treetops. "They'll find us," she whispered, her voice shaking. The human nodded, eyes focused. "That's why we keep moving," he said. He handed her a small device, shaped like a ring. "Press this if we're separated. It will hide your signal for a while." She clutched it tightly. Not sure what to feel, they moved fast, ducking under vines, jumping over roots. The forest floor was uneven and slippery. She stumbled more than once, but he always reached back to steady her, every time his hand touched hers. It felt real, not forceful, just steady, like he wasn't going to let her fall. Suddenly, a blaster bolt ripped through a tree beside them. "Down!" he shouted, pulling her behind a thick trunk. She covered her ears as more shots cracked through the air. Smoke grenades rolled through the leaves, hissing as they released a red fog. "They're here," he muttered, drawing his weapon. She had seen fights before, had lived through raids and beatings, but nothing like this. The human moved like a shadow fast, sharp, efficient. Each shot he fired found its mark. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to survive. And to protect her. He didn't say it, but she knew it. He kept his body between her and the gunfire at all times. Even when he took a graze to the shoulder, he didn't slow down. "Run." "North," he told her. "There's a cave. Go now." She hesitated, heart pounding. "Go," he said again, louder, more urgent. She turned and ran, her breath loud in her ears. Blaster fire cracked behind her, burning holes into the trees. But somehow she didn't stop. The jungle twisted around her like a maze. Branches scraped her arms, roots grabbed her ankles. But she kept going. She didn't stop until she saw it, a dark opening in a rocky cliff. She slipped inside just as another shot hit the ground beside her. Inside, it was damp and cold. She pressed her back to the wall, trying to breathe quietly. She waited, counted seconds, then minutes. Was he still alive? Had they taken him? Her hands shook as she stared at the cave's mouth. Then footsteps. She tensed, heart ready to burst. But then a shadow appeared, tall, familiar. It was him, limping slightly, blood on his sleeve, but alive. She rushed to him without thinking. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You're bleeding," she whispered, reaching for his shoulder. "It's just a scratch," he replied, though his face was pale. He pulled out a med patch and slapped it on the wound. They sat in silence for a while, the fire outside still burning in the distance. She watched the flickering light reflect off the walls. Finally she spoke. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photo. It showed a little girl with large eyes and short hair, smiling beside him. "She was like you," he said quietly, "captured in a raid. I couldn't save her." He looked at the photo, pain heavy in his voice. "But I can save you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice caught in her chest. Instead, she just nodded. He put the photo away and gave her a small nod in return. Outside, the sky lit up. Another hunter ship landed far off. More would come, but in that dark cave, something had changed. She didn't feel like prey anymore. She felt like someone worth saving. He looked at her again, more serious now. "You'll need to learn how to hide, how to fight, how to survive." She nodded again, this time with more strength. "I will," she said, her voice no longer shaking. He offered her a small training blade from his kit. Her hands trembled as she took it. Not from fear, but from something new, readiness. She tightened her grip, and for the first time, she felt like she could fight back. Asterisk rain fell hard from the jungle sky, cold droplets hitting leaves like tiny drums. The girl shivered as she walked beside the human. Her body was sore, feet muddy, and the sharp blade in her hand felt heavier with every step. Still, she didn't let go of it, not anymore. They had escaped the fire, the hunters, and the noise. But peace had not followed. Now they were running through storms in silence. The man limped with every step, his wound deeper than he admitted. She had seen him flinch, saw the pain in his jaw. Finally, they reached a hidden path covered in vines. The human brushed them aside, revealing an old stone staircase leading underground. "It's not much," he said, voice tired. "But it's safe." They climbed down together. The tunnel lit by flickering wall lamps that sparked weakly. At the end of the stairs was a steel door, sealed with a code only he knew. When it opened, warm air rushed out. The room inside was small but clean-lined with old medical supplies, dried food, and soft mats. She stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning every corner. No chains, no cages, just a quiet place carved into stone. It didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a hidden heartbeat inside the jungle. "You can rest here," he said, dropping his gear near a corner. He sat down slowly, breathing hard. Blood soaking through his sleeve, she moved toward him, unsure. "At first, I can help," she whispered, reaching for the med pack he had taught her to use. He nodded once, silent. She cleaned the wound with shaking hands. It wasn't deep, but it was messy. Still, he didn't flinch or pull away. He just watched her, calm and trusting. When she finished wrapping the bandage, he gave a soft smile. "Good work," he said. Her chest swelled a little with something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. She had never been praised for anything. No one had ever said, "Good job" to her before. Her fingers curled tighter around the roll of bandages. She sat across from him, watching as he set up a small heater and handed her a warm ration pack. The food tasted like dust, but it was warm. And for now, that was enough. She looked at him as he leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. He looked older than before, but not weaker. "Why do you live like this?" she asked quietly. "Hiding in jungles, running from bounty hunters." He opened his eyes, looked at her for a moment, then replied, "Because the galaxy's broken, and someone has to pick up the pieces." She didn't know what that meant completely, but she felt it, deep inside, the weight of everything he carried. After a while, he stood slowly and handed her a small shirt from his bag. "It should fit better than the coat," he said, looking away politely. She took it, holding it to her chest like a gift. She went behind a curtain and changed. For the first time in ages, she wore something clean. It wasn't fancy, not royal, but it made her feel human again when she stepped out. He had already rolled out a mat for her. He pointed to it and said, "You can sleep here. No one will hurt you." She nodded, sat down slowly, and looked at him. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Saying I'm safe." He stared into the dim light, silent for a few moments, then finally answered, "Because I need you to believe it." She turned away, curling under the thin blanket. She didn't know if she could believe anything anymore. But her eyes closed faster than they had in years. Sleep took her gently, not with fear, not with panic, but with warmth and a strange, quiet hope. In the middle of the night, she woke up to the sound of thunder. The power flickered, shadows danced on the walls. She sat up, heart racing. A nightmare still fresh in her mind chains, fire, laughter. But then she saw him sitting near the door, wide awake, watching. "You don't sleep?" she asked softly. "I sleep when you're safe," he said, not turning around. She felt something strange rise in her chest. It wasn't fear, or pain, or shame. It was the beginning of trust. She lay back down slowly, eyes never leaving him. And for the first time in her life, she whispered, "Thank you." He didn't reply, but she saw the way his shoulders relaxed, and in the quiet of that hidden cabin, two strangers became something else, something closer. Morning came slowly in the jungle. Faint light crept through cracks in the stone walls of the hidden cabin. The girl opened her eyes and for a moment didn't panic. She didn't wake to shouting, or cuffs, or cold chains. She woke to warmth, silence, and the smell of hot water boiling. The human was already up, sitting near a small heat plate. He handed her a steaming cup without a word. She took it carefully, sipping, letting the warmth settle in her chest. There was something different in her eyes now. She no longer looked like a ghost. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded slowly. "Better than I can remember." He gave a small nod and turned his attention to a map spread out on the floor. She watched him for a while, his focus, his calm, his quiet strength. Then she finally Asked the question she'd held in her heart for days. Do you want to know who I really am? He looked up at her, steady and kind. I was waiting for you to be ready to tell me. She placed her cup down, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of her story. And then she began to speak. My name was once Alira, she said. I come from a bloodline that ruled the Alaran moons. Her voice was soft, but her words carried power. My mother was queen, my father a general. We were peaceful but powerful. Then came the conquest fleets. She paused, her breath catching. They stormed the palace, killed most of my family, took me as a trophy. They told everyone I died, that the line was broken. But I was sold, again and again, hidden, passed like stolen treasure. And I forgot who I was, because remembering only brought pain. The human said nothing at first. He sat quietly, letting her speak every word. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. I became a number, a thing, not a person. But then you showed up and called me safe. He looked at her, eyes full of something deep understanding. You're not a thing, he said. You're not forgotten. You are Alira. She wiped her face, eyes sharp now. And I'm tired of hiding. He nodded slowly. Then let's remind the galaxy that you're still alive. She blinked, surprised. You believe me? I don't need proof to believe someone who's lived what you've lived, he said. But proof helps if we're going to take down the ones hunting you. She hesitated, then reached into the lining of her old dress. There, hidden under a folded seam, was a tiny data chip. It's the royal seal, passed to me in secret, she said. If anyone scans it, they'll know I'm not lying. He took the chip carefully, scanned it with his wristband. A golden symbol lit up on the screen, a crest with stars and wings. He looked at her, eyes wide now. You weren't just royalty. He said, you were heir to an empire. She nodded, her jaw set. And now they'll want me dead even more. He stood and began packing their supplies. We can't stay here, he said. If someone scans the air for this signal, they'll find us. She rose to her feet, no longer the trembling girl from the auction. I'm not running anymore, she said. I want to face them. He turned, meeting her gaze. Then we do it together, he said simply. She stepped beside him, shoulders squared. No more chains, no more silence. She wasn't just a runaway, she was a survivor with a name and a voice, and now she had someone standing beside her. As they prepared to leave, she looked at the old cabin one last time. This place had been a cocoon. She had walked in broken, but now she was something stronger. The human handed her a clean blade, polished and balanced. A gift, he said. For the real you. She took it, held it like it belonged in her hand. Then she looked at him, voice steady. Thank you for giving me a reason to speak again. He shook his head slightly. No, Alira, you gave that to yourself. They stepped out into the forest again. Not as a runaway and her rescuer, but as something more. Two warriors, bound by choice, not chains, and behind them, the old world burned quietly. Asterisk, the sun had not yet risen, but the sky above the jungle had turned a deep, warning red. Clouds hung low, humming with quiet thunder. It felt like the world itself knew what was coming, and what was coming was war. Alira stood at the edge of a cliff, looking over the dark valley below. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't move. She wasn't the same girl who begged in the auction room. She was steady, silent, her new blade strapped to her back. Behind her, the human checked his gear, double-checked the tracker. They found the wreck, he said calmly. And they're closing in. How many? She asked without turning around. Too many, he replied. But not all at once. First the scouts, then the hunters, and then the elite. They don't want you captured, he added. They want you erased. She nodded, no fear in her voice. Then we make it hard for them. He looked at her, his lips twitching into the tiniest smile. That's the spirit. He handed her a small device, round and glowing blue. It's a signal disruptor, he said. It'll scramble their drones for 2 minutes. Use it only when we need to run, not fight. Alira took it, tucking it into her belt. Then she picked up the old map he had marked with red circles. "This is where we hit first," she said. Pointing to a narrow canyon, he raised an eyebrow. "Ambush?" She nodded. "We don't have the numbers, but we have the terrain." And so they moved quiet as shadows, swift as falling leaves. By sunrise, they had reached the canyon pass. A narrow path between high stone walls and thick trees. They waited. Watching soon, the first hunter ship hovered above the ridge. Armored figures dropped down, scanning with glowing visors. Alira's heart beat fast, but she kept her breath steady. The human whispered beside her, "Wait for my signal." When the last soldier stepped into the trap zone, he nodded. Alira pressed the hidden trigger. Explosive vines snapped from the trees, wrapping around metal boots. The forest roared as fire burst from the ground smoke, sparks, confusion. Then came silence. 5 hunters down. The rest retreated, but not far. "They'll send more," the human said. Wiping sweat from his brow, Alira didn't answer. She was already scanning the next ridge. "We moved before they regroup," she said. For 2 days they ran between ruins and roots, setting traps, avoiding drones, striking fast and fading faster. She learned how to hide behind thick leaves, how to move without sound. And he taught her how to shoot, not for revenge, but for survival. "You don't aim to hurt," he said. "You aim to walk away alive." But even as they stayed ahead, the pressure grew. One night, while resting in the hollow of an old tree, they heard a strange whirring above. She looked up and saw them black drones, silent and sharp, too high to hit, but close enough to track. "They've upgraded," he muttered, pulling her deeper into cover. The next day, they lost the northern path. A patrol had blocked it with heat mines, and when they turned east, they found a burned village. Alira's chest tightened as she walked through the ashes. She saw broken toys, melted chairs, reminders of people who never got to run. "They're warning us," she said, teeth clenched. "No," the human replied. "They're trying to scare us into surrender." He looked around the ruined huts, then back at her. "But we're not giving up, are we?" She shook her head. "Never." That night, rain returned, heavy and cold. They hid under a rocky ledge, sharing dry rations in silence. Alira looked at the man beside her, his eyes tired, but still sharp. "Why do you stay?" she asked. "You could have left me back in that market." He stared into the flames and said, "Because the galaxy needs people like you to survive. And people like me," he added. "We're just here to make sure you do." Her throat tightened in. That single sentence, he had given her more than any crown or title. He had given her belief, and belief was stronger than fear. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they watched the trees sway and listened to the growl of distant ships. The enemy was close, but so were they side by side, no longer hunter and prey, no longer broken and rescuer, but 2 sparks in the dark, waiting for the right moment to burn bright. The sky cracked open with thunder. Rain poured like glass, shattering over the jungle. Lightning lit up the trees, showing metal shapes moving fast between the shadows. Alira stood on a crumbling tower above the valley, her cloak soaked, her hair stuck to her face, but she didn't move, didn't hide below her. Rows of black armored soldiers filled the ground. They had trapped her here, surrounded the ruins, aimed blasters at every stone. This was not a raid, not a hunt. This was an execution. The enemy had come to end the last daughter of Ilaren, and yet she stood there, tall, defiant, alive. Beside her, the human crouched, fixing the signal tower's wires. His hands moved fast, wet with rain and blood. He had been wounded again, but didn't stop. "This will send your voice across 6 systems," he said, teeth clenched. "If you're going to speak, now's the time." Alira nodded, her fingers gripping the ancient cum switch. She had no army, no weapons strong enough to match theirs, but she had the truth and her voice, something they had tried to bury, something no one could silence anymore. She took a deep breath and pressed the button. A soft hum rose from the tower, then her voice, shaky at first but growing stronger. echoed across space. "This is a Lyra of House Ilaran," she said. "I was taken, broken, sold like scrap, but I survived, and now I speak not just for myself. I speak for every forgotten voice, every soul left behind." The soldiers below looked up. Confused, commanders shouted for the signal to be cut, but it was too late. Her message had already reached the satellites, broadcasting. Live to trade routes. City domes, mining colonies, and capital halls. "You left while I begged," she said, rain dripping from her chin. "You thought I would stay silent forever. But I am not afraid anymore. I remember who I am and I know who you are." The human finished the connection and stood beside her. His gun was ready, but his eyes were only on her. "You did it," he said quietly. She nodded, her body shaking, not from fear, but from the power she had just claimed. Down below, the soldiers received new orders. "Kill her now." Blasters powered up, glowing red through the rain. Alira closed her eyes, ready. But before the shots fired, dozens of new signals appeared. On the scanners, ships, dozens of them, appeared on the horizon. Civilian vessels, freedom fighters, old rebels, smugglers, even ex-royal guards. They had heard her voice, and they came, not for gold, not for power, but because someone had dared to speak when no one else did. And that someone reminded them they still had a heart. The enemy commanders panicked, orders clashed. Fear spread through their ranks. They had power but no purpose. She had nothing but truth, and truth was winning. Blaster fire rang out, but it was scattered, confused. The jungle burned again, but this time, it lit up with rebellion. Alira fought beside the human, covering him while he took out the final jammer. They moved like one back to back, breath to breath, two flames refusing to die. When the last enemy ship retreated, the ruins fell quiet again. Smoke rose into the gray sky. Alira collapsed to her knees, exhausted, soaked, shaking, but not broken. Never again. The human sat beside her, one arm bloody, his face bruised. He looked at her and gave a tired smile. "Looks like your voice is louder than 1,000 guns." She laughed weakly, the sound almost foreign on her lips. "I didn't believe I still had one," she whispered. "But you did," he said. "I never stopped believing in you." She turned to him, eyes full of something new, something strong. "Why?" she asked again. "Why risk everything for someone like me?" He leaned back against the stone, staring at the clouds. "Because someone has to choose kindness. And because no one ever said those words to me." "What words?" she asked softly. He looked at her, eyes full of memory and promise. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her breath caught, and this time she believed him. The ruins became a symbol. The message Alira sent spread far, reaching others still trapped, still voiceless. And from those voices, a movement began. The girl they once laughed at had become something they could no longer ignore. A leader, a light, a legend, and beside her, always, the man who had whispered first, not as her protector, not as her master, but as the one who reminded her that even in the darkest places, someone might still whisper back, "You're safe now."